All right. Good morning, or sorry, good afternoon now, I guess, everyone. As I had mentioned, my name is Kyle. We've had a couple more attendees make their way in, so we'll get started right away here. I'll just give you a little bit of background information about myself. As I mentioned, my name's Kyle. I've been here with Alberta One Call and the Before You Dig partners for about 6 years now. For today's presentation, what we'll be doing is we'll be going through the process of creating an account, submitting a ticket and what that looks like, and then the different features that are available on our website. If you already have an account or you're already submitting tickets through the website, you might not find this particular webinar super useful. It'll cover a lot of topics you might already be familiar with. If you're already sort of an experienced user, you may be more interested in attending one of our Thursday webinars, which are our advanced sessions where we go into more depth on how to process specific types of tickets and different issues that you can come across. This is the basic session, so it's more about just getting an account set up and then submitting those requests and then what you can do with them. So the presentation itself will take about an hour, and then we'll have 30 or so minutes for Q&A, depending on how long it takes us to get through what we have. You'll notice at the moment you are currently muted. What we'll do is we'll keep you muted for the duration of the presentation, and then when we get to Q&A, what I can do is I can call on you. When we get to Q&A, you'll have the ability to raise your hand. I can call on you, unmute you, and then you'll be able to ask your question. Alternatively, you can also send in any written questions that you might have. Unfortunately, because I'm leading the presentation, I won't be able to address those right away, but when we get to that Q&A section, I'll make sure I go through all of them and address them in the order that we received them. If you want to, you can send those in right away though. Don't hesitate to do so. If you think of something as we're going through, it's great to get it out there. Someone else might have that same question. So to start, we're at our login page. So this login page can be accessed through any of the three provinces that we ourselves handle in our contact center. So if you go to Alberta One Call, Sask First Call, or click Before You Dig Manitoba and you go to submit a request online, eventually you're going to get to this page, and this is our login screen. So to start, what we'll do is we'll register for an account. If you don't have an account already, all you have to do is click the Sign Up Here button at the bottom of the page. And then we're brought to our new user registration page. So to start, we have our excavator details, and those are pretty simple: first name, last name, company, and job position. And when we click on each field, we'll actually get a pop-up box as well. It'll let you know exactly what we're looking for in that field. I'm just going to clear these fields that I have saved already real quick so we can start scratch. So first name's pretty simple. As I mentioned, my name's Kyle. It's nice and easy. Last name, my last name is H-U-H-N, so we'll enter that. And then the company. So I'm with Alberta One Call, as I mentioned, so that's what I would enter. And then we get to job position. If you have a position within your company, please feel free to provide it. I don't know if maybe you picked up on it already or not, but each of these pop-up boxes also lets you know if the field is optional or required. So for example, this job position one is optional. If you don't want to provide a position, you don't have to. You can't leave this field blank. If we jump back to one of the other fields we've already filled out, we can see that they are a required field, and that information is indicated as such. Now, before we move on to the contact details, let's just talk briefly about these orange boxes with the question marks in them. If you ever get stuck on a particular section and you want to see somebody else enter the information, you can always click on these boxes, and what it'll do is it'll pull up a YouTube video of somebody entering that exact information or filling out those fields so that you have an idea of what needs to be entered as well. Next is the primary phone number. That's pretty simple. I'm going to enter our company phone number real quick here. And then I'm going to take a second to talk about the tooltip that pops up when you're in this field. There are certain fields on our website, particularly phone numbers and search types, that you do need to follow a specific format for the information to be accepted. So for this phone number, you'll notice that I put spaces in between each sets of characters. You could have also done dashes or periods. Each of the formats that would be acceptable are listed on that tooltip. If you had an extension, all you need to do is put a comma and then include your extension as well. Next is our mobile number. You can also think of this as a secondary number if you have one available. For example, if your primary phone number is your cell phone, but you have a desk phone that you want to provide as well, you could put it in the mobile number. I'm going to leave mine blank. And next we get to email address. So an email is required because the utility owners tend to like to send their responses by email. We also send you a confirmation email once you've submitted your request. So we'll enter the email that I want to use right now. And it's very important that your email is correct because if a utility owner tries to send you a response that way, you might not get it if your email is wrong. And then you could be waiting there for a response that was already attempted to be sent. That's why we ask you to enter your email address twice, just to confirm that you have entered it as intended. Next, we get to our industry, um, and we'll go through some of these real quick. So this is kind of the general type of industry you're in. It's not necessarily the nitty gritty. Obviously, you could have multiple types of industries that you're involved with. Select whatever best applies. If you're a homeowner, obviously homeowner would be the one you'd want. If you handle mostly landscaping requests, landscaping might be the way to go. For my purposes for this demonstration, we're going to be a general contractor, so we'll select that. And then we get into user type. And there's three different types of users, and we'll talk about all three briefly. The first is homeowner. So that's pretty basic. If you are submitting a request for your own property, you'd be the homeowner as a user type. If you're a utility company that has underground lines registered with us, an example of those from each province would be ATCO Gas, TELUS, Manitoba Hydro, or SaskTel. Those companies all have their utilities registered with us, so they would be considered members. And then the last one is contractor, which most people will fall under. So this is if you're doing the work on behalf of someone else or another business, um, or you're a utility company that's not associated with our service. So for example, Shaw Cable is not a member of Alberta One Call, Click Before You Dig, or Sask First Call. And even though they have underground lines, they're still a contractor because they aren't registered with us. For the purpose of this demonstration, we'll be a contractor though. And then we'll get into our login details. So when I click on username, you're going to notice something happen. My email address is automatically going to be pulled and entered in this field. That's because our system defaults your username to your email address. It keeps things nice and simple. Now, just because it defaults to that doesn't mean you need to leave it as that. If you want to change your username, or if you have multiple accounts set up and you need the account to have the same email address but a different username so that you can log into it and keep those tickets separate, you can always make that change. So if you'll notice, I get rid of my @gmail.com, it's still acceptable. And I'm actually just going to add that back for 1 second. You'll notice over here, currently it says my unique account is verified, my username is available. That's because an account with the details I had didn't exist. But if I set it back to @gmail.com for my username, it lets me know the username is in use. So this means that A, somebody else already has an account under the email or username I'm trying to use, or B, I already have an account under that username or email. And because I lead these webinars every week, I obviously do have an account with this information. We're just going through the process. But it's nice to be able to show that off just so that you don't accidentally try and register a second account. Next is your password. The password does need to be 8 characters long, and it does need to contain at least one letter and one number. So for example, the word password is 8 characters, but there's no number in there, so you wouldn't be able to use that as a valid password. If you entered password 1, password, then the number 1, that would be considered a valid password and you'd be able to keep going. And then you'll need to also confirm that password to make sure you entered it correctly. And then we get to our security question. Now, this security question probably won't ever be used, but it's good to have this information entered just in case. If for any reason you no longer had access to your account, you couldn't remember the email, or your password reset wasn't working, or any sort of issue like that, and you contacted us to try and get back into your account, we're going to ask you this security question. So select whichever one you think the answer will be easiest to remember, or whichever one you prefer, and then you can enter that information in your unique answer. You're not required to ever type out your unique answer. We would just ask it for it verbally, so you don't have to worry too much about formatting or anything. Just make sure that how you remember it is how it's written down, because we're only going to understand that context of it, obviously. Next, we get into the MISC section. So the first checkbox in that section is the opt-in for our newsletters. So if you submit tickets pretty often and you want to be in the know about any changes that are coming through the pipeline, you might want to register for this newsletter. We also push out important information changes and things of that nature. So it's not a bad idea if you want to get those, but it's not required. You don't have to sign up for those newsletters. Next is the terms and conditions. You will need to check this box before you're able to proceed because these terms and conditions need to be accepted to use our website. If you want to review exactly what those terms and conditions are, you can just click the link right there. Then lastly is the I'm not a robot reCAPTCHA. This is so that we don't end up with a bunch of bot or spam accounts inside of our system submitting fake requests, wasting resources for ourselves or utility owners. So to proceed, all you need to do is click the checkbox. Sometimes it'll ask you to click on all of the signposts you see or any pictures with cars. Other times it'll let you just proceed. If you do get one of those ones where you have to click on the shapes, generally it'll let you know what you're trying to find, and then you just click on all of those pictures that they exist within. Now, I'm not going to click sign up because I already have an account with all of this information entered. But what happens after you click sign up is you're sent a verification email. In this email is a link to verify your account. It's very important that you go into this email and follow that link. Otherwise, you won't be able to begin submitting requests. If you just create your account and then you go to log in right away, you actually won't have the ability to submit tickets, period. That verification needs to be completed first. Now, when you click that sign up button, that email generally is sent immediately, but sometimes it can take a couple of minutes. Fortunately, I have a copy of one of those emails available for us right now. If you'll just bear with me for 1 second. So this is what one of those confirmation emails would look like. You'll notice it still came to that kylepelican@gmail.com. Obviously, I created this account almost more than a year ago, not almost more than a year ago, more than a year ago. And right here towards the middle of this is that validate your email link. So once we followed through this link, we'd be able to begin submitting requests. You'll notice it also provides you with your user ID number. If you had to give us a call for any reason, you could give us this user ID number and we'd be able to pull up your account. You could also use your phone number, first and last name, email, but that user ID number is going to be the shortest piece of information we could use. So if you want to or you call us often, you may want to just keep that number handy in the future. So let's jump back to our homepage now that we've seen what registering for an account looks like and the registration email you're going to see. And let's log in. So before I log in, I just want to take a moment to let you know about the site that I'm using. This version of the website is our test environment. I'm using this environment so that the utility owners don't accidentally get notified on requests that aren't actually happening. However, this website does function exactly the same as our current website with one minor change that we'll talk about when we get to it. But everything that you see today is exactly the same as our normal website. This is just for the sake of not notifying utility owners willy-nilly. So we've entered our username, we've entered our password. We need to agree to those terms and conditions because they could change in the time that we've registered on an account. If you ever want to review them, once again, you can just click on terms and conditions to take a look, and we'll click login. So this is our home page or console page. So this is where you're going to see a couple of different options, and we'll go through those all right now. Up in the top right, we have log out, account, and settings. Logging out would take us back to that login page. We'll talk about account right now. So if you needed to change any of those details you registered under, if you click on account, you'll be able to do so. We could change the company that we're with. We can change our phone number, email, username, password. Anything we registered under can be changed in your account by clicking that account button. Then all you have to do once you've confirmed or made those changes is click the update button at the bottom of the page. If you've made changes that you don't want to save, you can just click cancel instead. Settings we'll come back to in a little bit later after we've gone through the process of submitting a ticket. On the left-hand side, we have our details. So these are our account details. That ID number that was included in the registration email is displayed here. It also lets you know the company, phone, and email that you have under your account. Next, we have new ticket. Now, this is the button you would click to begin submitting your new request. If you hadn't verified your email, this new ticket button will not appear. It'll just be in blank space. So if you ever don't have the option to submit a ticket, it's because you haven't verified your email yet. We have history. So this is how you could go in and review your past requests. And we'll go in and show a couple examples of those after we've done one or two already. Then we have our most recent tickets. So what'll happen is it'll show you the 5 most recent tickets you've submitted. And then if you've also submitted any tickets since you logged in, those will also be displayed. And then if you log out, it'll default back to the 5 most recent tickets you've submitted. And we'll watch this grow if I submit any tickets today. And then lastly, we have positive response. And that's how you can let utility owners know that you haven't heard back from them yet. And we'll go into that in more detail later as well. To start though, let's start with a new ticket. So once we click new ticket, we're brought to our ticket details page. So this is where most of the information regarding your excavation is going to be entered. The questions that are asked here are the exact same questions we ask if you were to give us a call. So you're using the same exact submission form we would be using. The only difference is you're going to know this information a little bit better, or you're going to know where your work area is a lot better than we are. Many of you are probably familiar with the telephone game that many children play as kids, where you all sit in a circle and whisper a phrase or password to each other in a circle. And then when you get to the end, the first person says what the phrase was and the last person says what they said, and it almost never actually is the same. Well, that can also happen when you're giving us a call. Your description of your work area might make sense to you, but describing it to somebody who's not familiar with the site, it might not make sense. So submitting your ticket yourself online tends to have more accurate tickets created. So let's start with what's on the ticket details page. First, we have the province and territory. And there's going to be an additional province in there that I didn't mention, which is BC. BC also uses the same software. They're just run out of a different contact center than us. If you needed to submit a ticket in BC, you can use your same account, same website, and everything to do so. That portion of the country, though, is just not managed by ourselves. So we have Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan that we do in our contact center. So the examples that we cover today are going to be strictly in those provinces. So we'll start with Alberta because I'm located in Alberta, so it always makes the most sense for me. And then we'll talk about our different ticket types. So to start, we have regular, planning and design, project, and large project. There's 2 other types that aren't included there, which are planning and design and encroachment tickets. And we'll talk about each of those as well, but after we've talked about the first big 3, in my opinion. So to start, we have regular tickets. And regular tickets are always the same in that they have a maximum size limit, and that is 1,000 meters squared. Now, that's not a very large area. It's maybe 2 smaller residential properties or, most of an intersection, if not an entire intersection. But that size limit is 1,000 meters squared. Now, if your work area exceeds 1,000 meters squared, that doesn't mean you can't submit it altogether. It just means you need to select a different ticket type. Now, the next ticket type we have is a project ticket. And the project tickets are slightly different than regular tickets in that they change based on your location. If you're inside of a city, town, or any sort of municipality, a project ticket has a maximum size limit of 60,000 meters squared. So this might be used for things like if you were doing road construction inside of a city or town, or you had a large commercial site that you were working across, things of that nature, bigger sites. They also have a minimum size limit of 1,000 meters squared. So if your work area is less than 1,000 meters squared, you don't want a project ticket, you want to go back to that regular ticket type. Now, project tickets are also different if you're in a rural area or outside of any sort of city or town or municipal area. They still have that minimum size limit of 1,000 meters squared, but they have a maximum size limit of 800,000 meters squared, which is like 12 times the maximum size of inside of a city or town. And that's because rural areas or rural sites tend to be larger. They're either across entire quarter sections or it's large stretches of highway. So it makes sense that they would need a larger area per ticket. And then lastly, for the main ticket types, we have large project. And if you didn't guess already, this is the next step up from a project ticket. The size limits For a large project, the smallest size limit are the maximum size limits for a project ticket. So if your work area is too small for a large project, then you just need to go back down a ticket size. For urban area or inside cities, towns, municipal areas, an, a large project ticket has a minimum of 60,000 meters up to a maximum of 800,000 meters squared. For a rural area, it has that minimum size limit of 800,000 meters squared and a maximum size limit of up to 4.2 square kilometers, which is roughly 6 legal land descriptions. You might use a large project ticket if you're working on, say, an interchange inside of a city limit. You might even need to break it up into 2 large project tickets depending on how large of a work area it is. In a rural area, you might use a large project ticket for things like grading a new rural subdivision, or if you're doing any sort of seismic blasting in the area. So let's jump into planning and design next. So planning and design is only available in Alberta and Saskatchewan. It's not available in Manitoba. If you have to do a planning and design in Manitoba, what you do is you reach out to the utility owners in the area directly yourself, and then they'll just get you that information. But if you're in Alberta and Saskatchewan, you can submit what's called a planning and design ticket. So a planning and design ticket is for informational purposes only. You are not clear to excavate on a planning and design ticket. What happens with a planning and design ticket is you'd submit it if you're going to be working in the future, and you need to know where those utilities are located so you could plan your work, either for the shape of the building or where you want those services to be entering the building, or if you're going to be doing a massive road construction project and you need to know where the utilities are so that you can plan that out, then you'd submit a planning and design ticket. And then prior to actually doing your work, you would then need to submit either a regular project or large project ticket, depending on the scope of that work area. Once you've submitted that regular project or large project ticket, the utility owners would then provide you with a clearance to complete your work. Now we have encroachment tickets as well, and they're exclusive to Saskatchewan, and they're very, very similar to planning and design with just one key difference. So an encroachment ticket is also for informational purposes only. It's not to be excavated on, but it's used for, certain municipalities require that a encroachment ticket be submitted prior to things like the sale of a property or safety inspections. And what happens with an encroachment ticket is it only goes to the gas company specifically. And once again, it's not valid for digging purposes, it's only for informational purposes. With an encroachment ticket, you may have noticed that my type of work and activity automatically changed to encroachment. That's because there's no work taking place on an encroachment ticket. Now, for a planning and design ticket, you'll notice that that's not the case. That's because for a planning and design ticket, the utility owners would still like to know what type of work will be taking place in the area in the future. What we'll do though is we'll jump back to Alberta and we'll set it to a regular ticket just for our first example. So next we have type of work. And if we click on type of work, you'll notice that the types of work listed aren't super in depth. They're actually pretty vague. You know, things like gas or water or sewer or road work. Doesn't really get into the nitty gritty. And that's because the type of work is just the overarching type of work that you're doing. So if you're doing, say, a water service repair, that would just be water. Or if you're doing a gas line, gas. If you're doing any sort of landscaping, landscaping. Select whatever best applies for what you're doing. For this first example, we're going to pretend we are doing some landscaping. So we'll select landscaping, and then we get to our activity. And this is where you can provide that nitty-gritty detail. So you'll notice that with landscaping selected, I have different things available. I have fencing, footings, guardrails, paving, planting, masonry, lighting, stump removal, trenching, all sorts of different options. Select whatever one is actually the type of work you're doing. If your type of work isn't listed, you can always select other instead. Other is an option. Now, what happens if you have multiple types of work you're doing on the property? What you'll want to do is you'll want to select at least one of the types you're doing, and then you'll be able to include that additional information a little bit later on into the submission form. And we'll get there when we do. But for now, let's pretend we're going to be repaving. We're going to pave a tennis court. I know that there's a tennis court at this property and we have to repave it. Next, we get to our excavation method. And this is how you would be completing the work. So if you're using machine tools, any sort of bobcat or excavator, you'd want to put mechanical excavation. If you're using a hydrovac or vacuum truck, you might want to use hydro vacuum or vacuum excavation. If you have multiple types of excavation you'll be completing, select whichever one you'll be doing most or whichever one is most prevalent, and then we can indicate those other types of other types of excavation later on as well. For this one, we'll say we're using machine tools, so we'll select mechanical excavation. And then we get into depth. And then this is where that one key difference with our test site and our live site comes into play. Currently on our live site, there's only 3 depth options. There's less than 1 meter, 1 meter to 3 meters, and greater than 3 meters. It's important to select the maximum depth you'd be going to because utility owners actually parse that data. If they have only deep utilities, say greater than 10 feet in depth, and you're only going 6 inches down, chances are they actually don't need to come out and they might just send you an email or give you a call and let you know that your work isn't affecting their line and you're okay on their behalf. So it's always important to provide that depth. This is kind of a sneak peek into something that's coming, is that you'll actually have another depth option in the future. I don't know when it'll be available. We're still working through an issue that's come up with it. But to give you an idea, eventually you'll be able to select less than 0.3 meters, 0.3 meters to 1 meter, 1 meter to 3 meters, and greater than 3 meters. For my example today, we're going to say we're going about 2 feet down, so that falls between 0.3 and 1 meter. Next is our job start date. So this is when you'd like to begin the work. As you may or may not know, our utility owners request a minimum of 3 full business days. And then when you go to select your job start date, the first day that's able to be selected is the 7th. And I'll explain why that is. So today's the 1st. Today does not count as a business day because it's not a full entire business day. You need to submit your first business day would start the following business day. So technically the 4th would be the first business day, the 5th is the second business day, and the 6th is that third business day when you should be hearing back. Now, there's no guarantee when you could hear back from the utility owners on that day. You might not hear back from them until the very end of the day, in which case you might not be able to start your work that same day, which is why we have the default starting date as the next possible day. So we'll select the next available date because we want to get started as soon as possible. And then we get into our user reference. So this is where if you have any sort of job number or internal tracking that you want to provide on your ticket, this is where you'd want to do so. And the nice thing about this user reference field is it's fully searchable in our ticket history. So if you want to sort your tickets by, say, neighborhood or province or anything of that nature, job number, as I mentioned, you can do so by entering it in this field. What I'll do is, because I submit test tickets in all 3 provinces that we handle, I like to always put the province that I'm working within in that user reference. And then when I go to my ticket history, I can actually sort it by that, and it's great. And I'll show that off a little bit later. Next is the working on behalf of. So this is who the work is being done for. And once again, it's not super specific. We have 4 options. It's local government, utility, private, and other. So the local government, if we select any of these actually, not just local government, what happens is the utility authority changes. So with local government selected, we're able to specify what type of government that is. Is it the band or IR? Is it the Department of Defense, the MD or county, the Ministry of Transportation, or municipality? Now, if we change this from local government to utility or private, those options change. As private, it could be for a contractor, it could be for a homeowner or another business. For utility, it'll list the different types of utilities that exist. So cable TV, if it's an electricity provider, if it's a gas provider, sewer, telephones, or water services. And then if none of those manage to fit who you're doing the work for, you could always just select other instead. And just like the authority utility changed when we change our working on behalf of, so does the activity under type of work. You'll notice that we have curbing, deck, demolition, fencing, footings under landscaping, but if we change this to gas, the options that we have available are a lot different. Now it's anodes, contamination, corrosion, directional drilling. So some of the drop-down menus will change based on what you've selected previously. But as I mentioned, we're doing some landscaping, so we'll jump back to that. And it's being done for a other business, so we'll select that. And then next comes the on-site contact name or number. So When you submit a request, you are the primary contact for the locators. If they have any questions, concerns, or comments, they'll be reaching out to the account details that you've set up. So for example, if I submit my ticket and the locators have questions, they're going to either email me here or they're going to give me a call at 800-242-3447. If I enter someone as the on-site contact, that's essentially saying that there's someone that else that's a better point of first contact if the locators have questions, or there's somebody available at the site to show the locator where the work is taking place. If you're the best point of contact, you'll want to leave the on-site contact name and number blank. But if there's anybody that the locator should be contacting before you, enter them here. So we'll say I have Bob out on site and he's at 555-555-5555. So now the locators would contact Bob instead of myself. And then if they weren't able to reach out to him, then they would reach out to me instead. Next, we get into our property types. So these are both drop-down menus, and they are independent of each other in a sense. They both say that they're required, but as long as you have one selected, you can leave the other as please select. So for my example right now, we're doing some paving, and I mentioned it was for a tennis court, and it's on private property. So it's a commercial site, so we'll select private property. We'll have a couple of different options. We have commercial, none, residential, and vacant lot. Now this is a commercial site, so I'll select that. And now I have two options for public property. I can either leave this as please select, or I could change it to none. If I was working on public property as well, though, I could always set that to the public property that I'm working on. So if it was in the road sidewalk or boulevard, I could select one of the green space or road sidewalk options. But like I said, it's on private property only, so I'm going to leave it as none or please select. Now, for public property, there's obviously other types of public property that exist that might not be included in this drop-down menu. The big one that comes to mind is maybe crown land. If you're ever working on public property and the exact type of public property isn't listed, select whatever best applies. If you're working out in a field in the middle of nowhere, green space is perfectly sufficient in lieu of crown land. What you can do is you can always specify that exact property type later on, and we're getting close to that section. But for now, like I said, we'll just leave it blank. And then the very last question on the ticket details section is the area pre-marked. So if you've gone out to the site and you've marked out where your work is taking place with any white paint, stakes, or flags, what that does is it makes the locators very aware of where that work is going to be happening. So it makes their job easier because they know that exact area that needs to be marked out. However, this is not required. If you haven't pre-marked out your site, that's okay. You can just select no. In some instances, certain locators may ask you to mark your site before their arrival, but that would be on a case-to-case basis. So now that we've entered all of our information in our ticket details page, we can click the next button. And this brings us to step one, search for your dig site location. So let's go through the different types of searches that are available. The first search type is street or address. Next is intersection, then LLD grid, and XY. And we'll go through each of those, but we'll start with this street search first. So for a street search, all you have to do is enter the address you want to do the work at, along with the city that it's within. You don't have to provide a postal code, but you could. And when we click search, what'll happen is the map will try to find that location. And this is correct. And I can actually see that tennis court I said we were going to be repaving right now. So next is draw your dig site. And let's just talk about this very quickly. If we look underneath here, it'll actually give us the size limits that we're currently working with. And it'll let you know what the urban size limit and the rural size limit is for the ticket type you have selected. So because we have a routine or regular ticket selected, they both indicate that that maximum size limit is 1,000 meters. And it also lets me know that my map search was in an urban area, so that we're dealing with this particular size limit. Now let's talk about actually drawing your dig site and the different mapping tools that are available. So the first mapping tool we have at the top is the pan tool, and it'll be selected by default. With this tool selected, if you click on the map, you can drag it and move it anywhere you'd like. So if the search didn't take you to the correct address, you could always just drag the map down the street to the address that you're working at. Next, we have the zoom in and zoom out tools. So the plus button is the zoom in, the minus button is the zoom out. You can click on the buttons themselves directly to zoom out a single level. Alternatively, you can click any of these bars to jump to that zoom level specifically. So if we want to zoom all the way in right away, we can just click the top bar. If we want to zoom out all the way, although I don't think you'd be able to complete your mapping like this, you could do so as well by clicking that bottom bar. What you'll want to do is you'll want to find an appropriate zoom level that you can include your entire work area without having to move the map. So as I mentioned, we're working on just that tennis court, so we can zoom in all the way and be able to complete that, no problem. Next, we have our polygon tool. So this is how you actually complete the sketch of your work area. All you have to do is left click on this tool and it'll become selected. And you'll notice that there's a red dot following my mouse now. When I left click anywhere on the map, what's going to happen is I'm going to drop that point on the map. And you'll notice that now there's a line following to my mouse. Well, if I left click my next point, now a polygon starts to appear and we can see the shape. And so this shape that you create is the shape that you want to, sorry, is your work area essentially. You want this area that's highlighted in red to accurately represent the areas you'll be excavating in. So if we were just repaving the tennis court, we weren't doing any sort of the side areas between the fence and the court itself, the mapping might look something like this, where we just have that area that we're working on itself. If we're working within this whole corded area with the fencing and everything, this map would be insufficient because it wouldn't include the entire work area. And if there's a utility owner that just runs, say, diagonally through this courtyard right here and up into Stanley Road, and our map doesn't cross over their line, they're not going to be notified. And that would be my fault for not including my entire work area on their request. So you always want to make sure that entire area is highlighted. And a helpful tip with this polygon tool is that you always want to go follow the same path. You don't want to be jumping back and forth across your dig site. And I'll show you what happens when you do so. So if we go in a clockwise motion, in a sense that we're just going around in a circle for our dig area, just like that, we double click, we have no issues. It's perfect. The map stays on there, we're good to go. We've included our entire work area. If we don't go in a clockwise motion, if we kind of just jump all over the place between our points, we get these crisscrosses. And what happens if you have any sort of lines crossing in your area is your map will disappear and it'll let you know that those polygon sides cannot intersect. So we would need to make sure that we just follow either clockwise or counterclockwise, following that outline of the work area with no jumping around between points. And let's just show that off in another example. Let's say we were working in this entire intersection where there's more than 4 points. So if we just keep going around, we had no issues, our map finalized. But if we just jump between points, our mess becomes a mess. Our map becomes a mess and disappears when we try to finalize it. So you never want your lines crossing like that or you're gonna run into issues. Next is our edit tool. So let's create a polygon that's just a little bit too small. And let's say that we are in fact doing that whole tennis court up to the fences and we don't wanna have to redraw our polygon from scratch. Well, we can select the edit tool. And with this edit tool selected, if we left click on our polygon, it'll change to blue. And now we can actually make adjustments to it. You'll notice that all of the 4 corners that I clicked have red dots on them, and you can take those points and click and drag them out to where you'd like to move them. And then if you left click on the map, you'll unselect your polygon, and if it's still within your size limit, it'll save itself still. You might not be able to see them, but when we have this selected as well, there's also slightly faded out red points in between each of the dark red points. And these are vertices that you can add additional points to your map. So let's say we were actually not working on the tennis court, we were just working along the south boundary, the north boundary, and the west boundary, but we don't need the tennis court and we don't need this east side. We can actually just add points through this to redo our map essentially and change our polygon to better fit our needs. Next is the measuring tool. So if you have to determine how far away your work area is from a certain location, this tool is super handy. Something that I think that is probably the most common that it's used for is installing signs or poles from an intersection. Generally, you'll know how far from the intersection that pole's going or that sign's going. It might be 5 meters from the intersection, it could be 10 meters from the intersection, but you could use this measuring tool to measure that out. So if we click on the edge of the roadway, we can measure out how far we think it is, and then we would be able to create our sketch that way. So if we needed to measure out 30 meters, right about here was 30 meters, so we know that our sign was going right here. Now you might be asking how I knew that was 30 meters. At the bottom of the page, we actually have a measurement field. Now this measurement field will show two different things. If you have the measure tool selected, when you click and then move your mouse from that point you clicked, the measurement will go up and down depending on how close or far from that point you are. So you'll notice when I'm right over where I clicked, our measurement currently says 0.266 because I'm just not right over top of that same point. And as I move my mouse further away, that moves up to right here is about 53.875 meters. So we know that 53 meters is, or sorry, from this intersection, this is 53 meters away. The other measurement that will be shown down here is when you're completing your polygon. You'll notice that when I have no points on the map, it says 0. When I have 2 points on the map, it also says 0. That's because there's no polygon created yet, it's just a line. But as soon as we have our second point down and we start to create that shaded area, you'll notice my polygon increases. So this is how you can tell how large of a work area you have and if you have the right ticket type selected. So for example, if we were working within this entire courtyard as well as this playground area over here, and we go to map it all out, before we drop our final point, we can see that this is about 1,600 meters squared. So we would need a larger ticket type because we have regular selected right now, and regular only allows 1,000 meters squared. So what happens if you have an area that's too large and you go to finalize your map? Well, it disappears and it lets you know that that shape exceeds the maximum area allowed. Now, how would we solve that issue? Well, I want to finish talking about some of the map tools first, and then we'll touch base on that real quick. So next we have the map layers. So to start, we have Google Hybrid. This is the default map view, and it's a combination of the Google view and the Google satellite view. Essentially what it is it shows satellite imagery as well as street names. If we switch it to just Google, we'll only see the street names. If we switch it to Google Satellite, we'll only see the satellite imagery. We won't have those street names listed as well. If we select Google Terrain, it's similar to the normal Google map, except it'll also show you topography of the area. Now, in the prairie provinces, this may not be super useful. However, some of you may find a use for it. Next, we have LLD grid. I'll talk about that when we do a legal land description search because it'll make more sense then. We won't be touching on PNG grid because that's a BC only feature. If you have any questions about that, you should be reaching out to BC One Call directly. And then we have the city and town boundaries. And we'll also talk about that a little bit later. So let's jump back to what happens if your work area is too large for the ticket type you've selected. So I mentioned for this example, we're going to be working in the tennis court and the playground area. And when we go to finalize our map, we get that error message. We don't need to start the ticket over or anything like that. We simply need to just go back, change our ticket type, and search for the dig site again. So if we jump back to ticket details, which can be done just by clicking the details tab, we can change our ticket type. So we can change it from regular to project. And then all we need to do is just reconfirm our type of work. I said we're paving. Confirm our start date again. Click next. We're back at our mapped or our searched area, but you'll notice that it says the size limits are still the 1,000 meters squared, even though we changed our ticket type. To have that ticket type change take effect, you just need to search for the dig site again. You'll notice that now that I've searched, those size limits have changed. So now we're dealing with a minimum of 1,000 meters squared, and it's an urban area, so we know it's a maximum of 60,000 meters squared, and we can complete our sketch. And we were able to double click, our map stayed because we had the right ticket type. So next, let's talk about step 3, confirming your dig site. So this is where you want to enter your actual work site location. You'll notice that the address that I searched was automatically able to be pulled and entered in the submission form. If you search for an address, if it exists in our system, the software will do its best to pull that and enter it for you automatically. If it's an address that didn't exist on Google Maps, chances are you will need to enter this information yourself. Next is the town or city field. So this is in Calgary, it knew that, it defaulted. It's also in Alberta, perfect. And then it's the nearest cross street. This is an optional field. You'll notice if I click on it, it's an optional field. But we can see that the nearest intersecting street is 46th Avenue Southwest, so I'm just gonna provide it. All right. And then next we get to our remarks section. So I mentioned earlier that you can't enter multiple types of work or excavation methods in the ticket details, but this is where you'd want to enter that information. So if we were, repaving the tennis court and reinstalling the playground equipment, that lets the utility owners know both of the types of work that I'm doing, and it also lets them know the areas that I'm working within. And then if I have multiple excavation methods, I could also include those as well. So machine dig and using auger in playground. So this is where we can include all those extra details we weren't able to include earlier. This is also where you can include extra addresses. For example, if you were working across these 3 properties, you're only going to be able to enter one address in the street field, so you just enter the additional ones down here. Let's pretend this is 123 Stanley Road, or one of the addresses 123 Stanley Road Southwest. We can also mention that we're also working on 125 and 127 Stanley Road. So that covers basically ticket submission. I just kind of want to touch base actually on step 1 though, and why you have to enter your dig site twice, or why it might seem that you have to enter your dig site twice. Step 1, search for your dig site, is not necessarily where you're doing the work. It's simply to get the map close to or to that exact location. There's going to be addresses that unfortunately don't exist in our system. Our system does use Google Maps, and while it's pretty up to date, in some areas it's lacking information, especially newer areas. If you're working in a newer area and you try to search for a specific address and it's not pulling up, what you might want to try is searching for an intersection instead that's nearby that property and then panning the map over to that location. So let's just give you a quick idea of what that might look like. Let's say we're a contractor and we know we're working on that apartment building that's on the corner of the intersection, but we can't remember the name of the address, but we know it's on the corner of 46th Avenue and Stanley Road Southwest. Well, that's exactly what we could do is we could search for the intersection we know is nearby. And then we could just move over to our dig area. We could just scroll it over to that apartment building. We don't actually have to search for our exact work area. We're just trying to get the map to bring us as close as possible to it. Now, obviously, if you know the address or you know the intersection or you know your GPS coordinates or your legal land description, you can just search those directly. But just to give you an idea of why we ask for it again in step 3. Step 3 is to confirm the actual location. Step 1 is just to get the map to bring you to that location. So I'm not going to submit this ticket because it is in Calgary. We do have test members that are set up, and I don't want to be sending them any sort of ticket that might confuse them. We're obviously very busy. I'm not sure if you've tried to give us a call this week, but I'm sure the utility owners would appreciate not receiving any sort of extra tickets in their system. So what I'm going to do is, instead of submitting this, I'm just going to show you a ticket that has been submitted, and then we'll talk about what that looks like. So I have one that I've saved for this area in the past, and we'll just close out of this one and jump over to real quick. What we'll do is we'll pretend that we've clicked the submit button, and then we're looking at our ticket confirmation page, which I'm just going to jump to now real quick, if you can bear with me and pretend that we aren't backing out of this ticket and we did just submit it. All right, so this is what a ticket submission page would look like. After we've clicked submit, what'll happen is you'll be provided with your ticket number for the request. You'll be also let your request details known. So it'll tell you when you created the ticket. It'll tell you the priority. So all tickets are normal priority except for emergency type tickets. Emergency tickets, it would obviously show a different level of priority, but those are not accepted through the website. If you needed to submit an emergency, you'd need to give us a call anyway. Next is the ticket created by. So it'll just say web if you submitted the ticket online yourself. If it was a ticket that was created on the phone, it would indicate phone in this location. And then it'll have the delivery method. And this is where we sent the confirmation email to. So you'll notice that it's just the same email that I have for my account. Then we get into our ticket details. This is where it just goes through all of the information that you've entered on the ticket so you can verify that it's correct. You'll notice it's not the exact same as before because this example is different than this ticket I've pulled up, but it still gives you an idea of what it looks like. And then it also has that remarks section where you entered your additional information. And then in the middle of the page, it also has the utilities list. So this is where you'll get the list of notified utility owners that you're going to get a response from. So underneath type, it sometimes will say private asset owners because we haven't specified what type of utility they are. Um, Obviously, ATCO Gas is pretty obvious. It's a gas utility. But on the live environment of our service, some utility owners will specify what they're marking for under this type. Next is the authority. So that's the utility company that is being notified. In this instance, it's ATCO Gas. And then it's the station code. So this is the specific ATCO Gas line or set of lines that's being notified. So this is how they can track those services or those types of requests. It's basically so they know which locator needs to be sent out. And then the status. So notification sent means that the ticket was successfully sent to the utility owner. If it were ever to say authority exclusion here, that means that the utility owner wasn't actually notified and you're not waiting for a response for them. If it's an authority exclusion, they might be on the ticket for tracking purposes only. They might want to just keep tabs on all of the tickets that are submitted in specific areas. For example, the Edmonton Locate Consortium, they're the oversight group for the locators in Calgary, or sorry, in Edmonton, not Calgary. They might show up here, but they will most likely say authority exclusion because they're not actually providing a response. They just want a copy of the ticket. So let's talk about some of the options that are available on the right-hand side here. There is typically more options available. However, because this ticket is a year old, those features aren't available right now. What we'll do is we'll process another ticket for a different search type, and we'll take a look at those options in a second. We'll just talk about the 4 that are available right now. So first is resend PDF. I don't know if I mentioned it, but when you submit your request, once it's been submitted and you see this page, you're also sent a confirmation email. That confirmation email looks very, very similar. It shows you your ticket number, the ticket details, who's been notified, and the map of your, the drawn map that you created. Clicking resend PDF will simply just resend you that confirmation email. Print view will open up a printable format of the ticket if for any reason you need a paper copy. All you need to do is just click the print button. To exit, you just need to click exit print view. Next is positive response. We'll go into that a little bit later at the end of the presentation. And then we have new search. And this is where you could search different tickets in your ticket history. We haven't really gone into ticket history, but we'll do so after we talk about our other two search types. Essentially what this button does is just bring you back to your ticket history. So let's jump back to continue current so we can use our ticket that we had been started already. And just a quick note, I guess we should talk about that. If you have a ticket that you've started and you need to jump back to the home page for any reason, that ticket will temporarily be put on hold. It'll be put right here, continue current. Now, if you log out of the website entirely, this button will no longer appear, your progress will be lost. But if you needed to go verify if you had submitted a ticket for a different area, you could do so. You could, pop out of your ticket, you can go into your history, look up for, let's say we're trying to figure out if we've submitted a ticket for 4637 McLeod Trail Southwest. Oh, hey, look, we've seen that we have this ticket already submitted. So we can jump back into our continue current and we can be like, oh, we don't need this ticket. We need to submit our next ticket, which is going to be a legal land description grid. So legal land description is a quarter section, township, range, and meridian, and it's essentially a grid reference for the provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Once again, this is something that requires a specific format for it to be entered as. So what we'll do is we'll use one of the examples that it provides. So it uses the northwest of 050302 west of 5. And let's talk about some of the common errors that can be made when searching legal land descriptions. The first one is not including 2 characters in every set of numbers. For example, if we search as just the northwest of 50302 west of 5, we're going to get an error message. It's going to let us know that that location search has failed. This is because we did not follow the formatting laid out in the tooltip. Each set of digits needs to have 2, and in the case of the township, it could have 3 digits. So if we pop that 0 back in there to make it northwest of 050302 west of 5, that search will proceed no problem. Now, the other common error that's made when searching legal land descriptions is not including dashes between every set of characters. If we get rid of one of those dashes, we're going to run into that same problem where that location search failed. Now, because we're searching legal land descriptions, let's actually submit a let's actually take a look at GPS coordinates real quick first, and then we'll submit a ticket for a legal land description where I know there's no utility owners in our test server, and then we can go from there. So next is XY, which is essentially GPS coordinates. And there's 3 types of XY you can search. The first is long and lat, then there's NAD 83 and UTM. They all function exactly the same in that you enter your X coordinate, your Y coordinate, and then click search and it'll bring you to that location. So let's take a look at one right now. So we have negative 106.7290008 and 52.14223.8. This might look strange to some of you. I, at least before I started here, always phrased my lat before my longitude. You'll notice that we've entered our longitude first. If we search for that though, it'll bring us to the exact location we're trying to get to. If we had these reversed, let's say we searched our positive number first and our negative number second, what happens is we get brought to an area that says, sorry, we have no imagery here. And what happens is if we zoom out, it still says, sorry, we have no imagery here. And if we zoom out all the way, it's just a blue square. And what's happened is we've searched our GPS coordinates in reverse and it's taken us to the middle of the ocean. So if you ever just get a blue screen when you search GPS coordinates, chances are you might just have them formatted backwards and you just need to swap them around. So we're running pretty close to Q&A time, but I still want to show off a couple more features. We don't have too many attendees, so I don't think we'll have too many questions. So I'm just going to try and power through the next 15 minutes and cover as much as I can, and then we'll jump into those questions. Let's do a legal land description ticket real quick for that area that I said there's no utility owners in our test site so that we can show off the other ticket options that are available to you. So this is not a correct ticket. Please don't ever submit tickets like this. This is just so I can get to a ticket that's been processed recently and I can show you the different options that are available to yourself. What I will talk about though is real quick is step 3 in rural areas. Let's pretend for a second that this is my actual work area. We are doing work in this middle of nowhere location in Alberta. So what would we enter for street, town, or city in an area that doesn't have a street or town or city? What we would do is for the street, we would enter rural because it's a rural area. For the town or city, we would also enter rural, and you'll notice in the tooltip it says to do so. If you're working outside of any municipal boundary, enter the word rural. And then we'd enter our province. There's no near cross street, so we'll leave it blank. There's no nearest community, so we'll leave it blank. And same with rural subdivision and municipal district. We don't know them, and they're optional fields, so we won't worry about them. If this was a rural area that you did have an address for, you can provide that address in the street field. You would still just want to enter rural and town or city. Because there's no address available for this location or no street available, I am just going to enter rural as well. Now I'm going to submit this ticket. And we see a page very similar to the last one I showed you guys. But this time we have a different option available here right away. And when we come back into this ticket in a second, we'll have even more. But I want to talk about continue ticket. So continue ticket is how you can submit multiple requests if your project exceeds the maximum size limit. If your work area was greater than the 4.2 km squared in a rural area, say you had 5 km squared and you needed to submit multiple tickets, well, this continue ticket is how you can do so. If you click on this button, all of your details are entered again. All you have to do is confirm the start date. Because this part of the project might be starting a little bit later, especially if it's a massive area, you might not be doing the whole area starting at that same day. But if you are, you can always select that same day. If we click next, we get brought back to the map and we actually see the old map there. It might be hard to see because it is in gray. So what I'll do is I'll turn off our satellite imagery for a second and we can see that map. So then we would map out our next work area or part 2 of the work area. We select our polygon tool and you'll notice when I get close to this old polygon, my polygon actually kind of snaps to it. You'll notice that the red dot kind of jumps to it. That's so that you don't end up with any holes in your work area, so that you can easily just do that next section, enter your dig location information again, because maybe it's a different address, maybe it's along a different street now. And then you'll notice in the remarks section, it has a continued from and that previous ticket number. So it's kind of tying them together for the locators to let them know that this is a continuation or part of the same project. And then we can submit this second ticket. Now, if I didn't go through all that explaining while I was doing that, you'd see how quickly I can get those other tickets pushed out. So if we go to map out our next portion of our work area, it maybe took me 30 seconds total to get that third ticket out. So if your work area does exceed the maximum size limit, that's okay. You might just have to get creative with those continue tickets to get it all included. So let's pop out of this ticket real quick and let's jump into the one we just processed. And now we have lots of ticket options available. That's because this ticket has been sent off to the utility owners. It's finally fully confirmed in our system. So let's go through those ticket options that are available real quick. The first one is ticket edit. So this is where you can make any changes to the ticket that you need to. If you entered anything incorrectly or you need to add additional information, all you have to do is click ticket edit. Sorry, normally all you'd have to do is click ticket edit and you'd be able to enter that information. Because this ticket was just submitted, I am getting an error message. So what we'll do is we'll come back to these in just a minute and we'll talk about something else. So when I started my new ticket at the start here, you'll notice that a lot of the information is already pre-entered. It jumps automatically to private homeowner. My ticket size defaults to large project ticket. And that's because of this settings field up here. So I'm just going to jump back home and we'll take a look at the settings. So if you find that you're always submitting a ticket for a certain type of work, or you're always using just hand tools, or you always do routine tickets, you can pre-build your tickets beforehand so that when you go to start them, those information fields are already filled out. So for example, let's change this back over to a regular for landscaping. We're a fencing company. All we do is fencing every day, all day. We use an auger. We go 4 feet just to be safe. And it's always for homeowners on private residential property. And we always need them to mark out the entire site. And we're good contractors, so we mark out that fencing beforehand as well. If I click update, when we jump into our new ticket, You'll notice that all of those fields are pre-built how I had just entered them. And they can still be changed. If you have a one-off ticket, you're like, oh crap, we're not fencing this time, we're actually putting in a pool. Well, we can make those changes as we need to. And it won't change our settings if we change it on the ticket specifically. So if you ever have one-offs, you can still do them, no problem. So that covers settings, account, and log out. We still have history, positive response to talk about, and I want to touch on those ticket options real quick if we're able to. So let's jump back into one of the tickets we processed and click that ticket edit button. There we go. So now it's working correctly because the ticket's been in our system for a couple minutes. And what happens is you get a pop-up box asking for the reason for the edit. So let's say we needed to change our on-site contact. What will happen is we'll open up the ticket and we'll be able to make that change. So it's not Bob, it's Jim, and he's actually at 444444444. We click next. Oh, confirm our start date again. Click next. And you'll notice that my map is still complete. My dig site information is still entered. The only thing is now there's a note in our remarks. That's that exact same comment that we're changing our on-site contact, and we'd submit the ticket again. And when you submit the ticket, you're generated a new ticket number because the request is no longer the same, it has changed. And the old ticket or the previous ticket is automatically canceled. So this was the original ticket that we had with Bob on it. And this is the ticket that we processed where we updated it to add Jim. So since Bob is no longer on site contact, this ticket is no longer necessary. It's a dead ticket because this ticket has replaced it. And you'll notice that these tickets are tied together up here in the request details to make it nice and easy to track your tickets and manage them. I'm just going to back out of this one though, since we just processed it and I don't want to run into any more errors. And let's talk about the other ticket options. So if you have a ticket that you need to cancel, you're not doing the work anymore, or the customer has said that they don't want the work to be done anymore, you can click ticket cancellation, just provide a reason for cancellation, and then you'll be able to cancel the ticket. So for this one, I'm no longer doing the work. Send cancellation. It'll let you know that the cancellation has been successful, or if it's failed for any reason. You'll notice at the top of the ticket, it doesn't say it's canceled yet, but if we come back into this ticket, the one ending in number 25, it will say that it has been canceled. It just needs to be refreshed essentially for that cancellation message to pop up. And then a couple more ticket options we'll go through. We already talked about resend PDF. We already showed off the continue ticket function. We've already talked about print view and new search. So now that's all that's left is positive response and relocate ticket. So in Alberta specifically, the utility owners provide a clearance date of, or a clearance window of 30 days unless otherwise specified. Now, obviously your project could take longer than 30 days to be completed. So if you ever needed to have the marks redone or the clearances refreshed, all you need to do is select relocate ticket. A relocate of a ticket is supposed to be exactly the same as the previous request. There are a few fields that can be changed, and we'll talk about those now, but essentially your work area, your type of work, and excavation method and depth and everything should all be staying the same. The things that can be changed are the on-site contact. Obviously, if you're on site for a long period of time, you could have multiple supervisors that take over that site in that period. So you might want to enter a new site supervisor when you're doing your relocate. Uh, the other options that can be changed is working on behalf of. Maybe the contractor has changed. Maybe you're operating as a new subcontractor, etc. And additionally, who you're working for doesn't affect the response that's being provided, so it doesn't matter essentially for a relocate. You can change your user reference if you need to. You can change your job start date. Obviously, you're not starting a month in the past anymore. You want to get started in a week from now or whenever your site reopens because your locates have expired, so you'd want to select that date. And then we get to depth. And this is where we were talking about how this website or the test server is different than the regular website. On the regular website, you cannot change your depth on a relocate. This is just able to be changed right now because we've added that extra depth option and we're running into some issues with it being able to be changed. And that's why it hasn't been pushed to the live environment yet. So when you go to process a relocate, you will not be able to change this. And in fact, I shouldn't even be able to change it now. It's a bit of a glitch, and that's why that other depth option hasn't been added yet. So the only other thing I think we have to talk about now is positive response. Oh, and you know what? Ticket history. Let's talk about ticket history first because it's a little bit easier. So ticket history is essentially how you can review any of your previous tickets. If you have a ticket number that you want to find specifically, you can always put it in ticket number and have the search equal to, and it'll find that ticket specifically. Now you can always change equal to, then less than, more than, or not the same as. If your ticket, sorry, if it's set to less than and you enter a ticket number, what it'll do is it'll find all the tickets that you submitted prior to that ticket number. If you have it as greater than or more than, it'll find all the tickets that were submitted after that ticket number. If you have it as not the same as, it'll find every ticket number except that ticket number. Next is your user reference, and I already kind of talked about this, how I like to use my provinces as my user reference. Essentially, you can put anything in your user reference, and then it's a searchable field in this history tab. So if, for example, I've sorted all my provinces, or sorry, all my tickets by province in the user reference, if I search AB, I'm going to get all the tickets that have AB there. And same thing with SK or MB or any other sort of user references I have. Those would all be searchable. We can also search for a specific date range for tickets that we submitted. So if we're looking for all our tickets from today, there's the 4 we did. If we're looking for all our tickets in a specific city, we can also do that. Oh, if we're looking for all of our a certain type of ticket, we can also do that. And these can also be combined. So we could also be looking for all our Calgary regular tickets. So that's how our search function works, or our history function works. It's essentially just for you to keep track of your tickets or look for any ones that you've submitted in the past. And this will keep track of any ticket that you've submitted in this system. Lastly, before we get into Q&A, let's talk about positive response. So as I mentioned, this is where you can submit reminders to utility owners who haven't gotten back to you within that 3 full business days. Just a quick note is that this test server that we've been working off of this whole time is located in Australia. So this might just take a couple seconds for it to load. Keep in mind that the regular website is located in Canada, or North America at least. So the load time is much, much lesser. You wouldn't run into this long wait while using the normal website. But like I said, we want to use the test environment to try and mitigate as much as possible the utility owner's interruptions. So now that we've loaded up positive response, what we're seeing is a list of the tickets that we've submitted that are still currently open or haven't expired yet based on when they were submitted. If you have a utility owner that's been notified, when you click on the ticket, those utility owners will be listed right here. Because this ticket was in the middle of nowhere, there's no utility owners there, so this list is currently empty. That was intentional, as I mentioned, because I don't want to be sending any test tickets out to utility owners right now because they are very busy. But let's just pretend that the utility owners are listed here. They'll all have their own different I guess, field or list, they'll all have a checkbox beside each utility owner's name. What you need to do is if you haven't heard from someone in the 3 full business days, just click the checkbox next to their name and then click send reminders. What that does is it sends an automatic notification to them that they have not responded in time, and then they're supposed to be in touch with you before the end of that day. If for any reason they weren't in touch with you, we'd want you to log back in and submit another reminder, exactly the same way you did as the first. If you ever get to the point where you're submitting second, third, fourth, and hopefully you're never getting to a 4th reminder. If you're ever at that point, please also follow it up by emailing us or giving us a call and letting us know so that we can also follow up with the utility owner. Unfortunately, they don't let us know when they're responding to your requests, and we have thousands upon thousands of tickets, so there's no way for us to track your responses for you. However, if you are running into issues getting responses, we're more than happy to follow up on your behalf, but you need to let us know about those issues. All right, so that was a ton of content we just covered in the last 15 or so minutes. I think that covers everything that I have to go through today. I apologize for being a little rushed in the later half. I guess I was talking a little too slowly in the first half. So what we'll do is we'll open the floor to questions. If you have a question you want to ask me specifically, please feel free to raise your hand. Like I said, I'll call on you. You can ask your question and then we can go from there. What I'll do right now though is I'll just give you guys a second to do so while I go through the written questions. So Braden asks, what type of minimum work would require a line locate ticket? I understand why you're asking, Braden, and I'll answer it like this. Our service, we recommend you submit a line locate prior to any form of ground disturbance, regardless of the depth or type of work. This is to prevent you from being held liable for any damages that could occur during that work and to also keep you safe. If a line is mismarked by the utility owner, that becomes their problem, less so yours, because they've provided an incorrect response. Whereas if you just dug and you hit that line, it would still be your fault because you didn't have a line locate in place. So we always recommend you submit a locate for any type of work and any depth to keep yourself protected. That was the only written question I actually had, and it doesn't look like we're getting any hands raised. So what I'll do is I'll keep the presentation open for another 10 or so minutes. If you think of any questions, please feel free to ask them. Like I said, I'll keep my eyes out on for those hands and in the written question box. Otherwise, I'm just gonna start canceling those tickets I did today just so they're not on my account as open. Thank you all so much for attending. I hope you found this basic webinar useful. If you're looking for some more advanced examples or you want to go in depth about some of the intricacies about our website, maybe you want to sit in on one of our Thursday webinars. If you're not available on Thursdays, we also have videos of those webinars available. I can definitely get you one from even yesterday when I led that session. Alternatively, I'll be back next Thursday. I think that's the 4th or the 5th. Let's just double check. It's actually the 7th. I'll be back on the 7th. I believe we start those ones at 11:30. No, I think that we actually start them at 11. Regardless, you can sign up for those ones as well, and we'd be happy to go through those. If you have any sort of feedback that you want to provide, please feel free to reach out to us. You'll receive a thank you email after we end the presentation. You can reply back to that directly, or you could also shoot us an email, and that would go to info@beforeyoudigpartners.com. And you can let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, if you'd like to see changes in the future, or how you think we could improve our process. So Jessica asks, is there a way to change an existing ticket without changing the dig date if the dig area doesn't change? Example, if you change a ticket the day before your meet. Unfortunately, there is no way to keep that ticket, the start date the same because a new ticket is generated. The way that that field actually works is there's no sort of leeway. We don't have any workaround with it. It's dictated by the system on the back end. So you'll automatically have to default to that last date. What I would suggest is if you have to make those changes, either reach out to us directly and ask if we can have that new ticket expedited because there's no actual changes. You just needed to make a change to, the contact or whatnot. And we can reach out to those utility owners to see if we can keep them for their scheduled date if they've already made one, or you may want to reach out to them directly with your updated ticket number to see if they can just accommodate that request from you directly. Yeah, no problem, Jessica. And yeah, it looks like no other questions have come in since. So like I said, I'm just going to start canceling those tickets. I'll keep the presentation open for a little bit longer if you think of anything. But yeah, once again, thanks for attending, and I hope you found today's presentation knowledgeable. Dylan asks, where would you request to cite me with the locator? You'd actually do that in that remarks section just after you've entered your dig site information, where you'd include any additional types of work or excavation methods. If you just put in there, would like to meet with locator or please contact for site meet, that's exactly where you'd want to put it. No problem, Dylan. And you know what? That actually looks like it'll probably be the last question I handle. It looks like most of our attendees have already funneled out for the day, and I'm not seeing any other questions come in. If you think of anything that Sorry, if you think of anything after we've already closed the presentation, don't hesitate to reach out to us by email. We'd love to help you out or answer those for you then. Once again, thanks for attending and have a wonderful day.